Welcome to another video. Today I want to talk about the difficulty level in Final Fantasy XIV's recent expansion Shadowbringers and how that changed compared to previous expansions. And of course, if the change is a good one for a broader variety of players, or if they could add a pinch of spice to the sauce again. A short disclaimer, this video shall not serve as a rant or bad criticism against the recent state of the game, more like a conversation and transposition about how normal difficulty has changed during the past expansions up until now. And I would love to hear your thoughts as well, but first let me talk a bit about my own background and experiences. And of course, I'm simply talking about normal mode content. Extreme, Savage and Ultimate is perfectly fine the way it is, and I'm looking forward to new encounters in Endwalker. First of all, I have started to play Final Fantasy XIV somewhere in between central patches of A Realm Reborn that featured many primal trials, the Crystal Tower 24-man raid and the Coils of Bahamut raid, which had been the game's first 8-man raid. While not participating in any of these raids myself, except an occasional run of the Labyrinth of the Ancients and the hard modes, I haven't experienced the real difficulty level because the 24-man raid, especially the first part, always felt very gimmicky and not very demanding. But when watching Asmongold do the Coils of Bahamut with minimum item level, which basically mimics the situation and power level you had when doing this in A Realm Reborn itself, this is a hell of a difference compared to our actual difficulty level that you can find in Shadowbringers raids or even in some that were featured in Stormblood. While I cannot deny the presence of difficulty content when Square introduced ultimate content in Stormblood and taxing Savage raids and extreme trials, still sometimes I really miss a fine challenge in normal mode content. Especially when looking back at fights like the Cruise Chaser in Heavensward. Oh man, how awesome it was to know that you actually have to fight for completing it, for getting the weekly loot, because of the explosion markers being placed incorrectly or people getting confused or burn markers didn't get their needed healing. Even if that may already turn off some players, being an optional raid I really liked the difficulty level and that you had a good challenge even before the need of making marker setups and directing your group into certain roles and spots that always are required in extreme content or higher. Which kinda is the biggest disadvantage of higher difficulty raids and trials. You always have to set people to certain positions and let them do exactly what their position and role demands. But when looking at the Bahamut fight, while being quite a bit too chaotic for the overall player base, I really love the idea of having tasks to do spontaneously and reacting to situations happening, instead of firmly knowing all mechanics in advance. That combined with the recent combat system and job rotations would be awesome, and I would love to do content like that with rotational complexity that I always felt missing in A Realm Reborn. I guess my point here is that even when I still think Final Fantasy XIV's PvE is the best among all MMOs, I still believe that there's room for improvement, especially all the strategical aspects of taking up responsibility for your role's task and reacting to situations happening. Basically having more room to do strategies, because apart from uptime optimization, these strategies are basically all the same, because there's no other option than to do the mechanics properly. And especially in normal mode content, the death penalty is there, but as long as 3 or 4 people know their stuff, you can easily get pushed through the challenge all along without worrying too much about your own performance. And I really miss the team aspect of this, especially in 24-man raids. As I remember to have hyped my friends about how challenging and fun it is to play normal mode content in Final Fantasy XIV when the first part of the Ivalice raid series had been introduced and the first 2 bosses were actually among the most difficult and taxing of all 24-man raids so far. And even if the overall difficulty level of the second and third parts of the raids were a tad easier, the mechanics and boss designs were phenomenal. Sedolphus, the math robot, just some awesome examples. However, that somehow changed in Shadowbringers. While I really dig the design of the Yoha raid, wiping completely is actually really hard, and at least after the initial run that we all did, it never felt so pointless of dying here, because there are simply no mechanics anymore that demand the whole party to be alive, and you can easily get carried through this content. Actually, I cannot identify the reason behind it, but I guess it has something to do with having one-hit mechanics for each individual player, and there are many of these, but not so many mechanics that heavily demand the party to play as a team, which feels more like actually playing content with other people. Yes, this highly avoids conflict in the party itself, but especially for people that are new and constantly dying, the raid design doesn't have much to offer, apart from frustration, and the good players actually don't need to explain things anymore or care about the success of their whole party, because it doesn't matter much that you're getting the clear with 4 or 8 people alive. But at least I have found a glimpse of hope for normal difficulty level raids when doing the Castrum Lacus Litori, which is the first raid featured in Bosya's relic weapon content. And here we went with half of the possible people, and even if it may scale a bit when less people are participating, the difficulty level of the last two bosses is exactly what I'm looking for. People are dying. Alright, we have to fix it. Players stood out and talked about mechanics to assure that less people are dying. Second wipe. Okay guys, we really have to kill that first and focus on this. And feel free to ask if anything is unclear. And even if we didn't achieve victory on that day, the more I looked up for the second time doing it to improve my own performance and the overall team play as well. In Delubrum Reginae, after dying all the time on my first time streaming it, after I learned the mechanics, the raid turned out to be super boring, even if the mechanics are well done and offer a very creative and unique design that I have never seen before. And when looking back at all these observations, I guess everything spirals down to the aspect of assurance. Because as long as you know the raid will be cleared, no matter how bad your performance is, boredom is created easily. And I guess the final ingredient to make normal content more attractive and enjoyable is the constant fear of not solving the puzzle and not getting your gear in the first run, when you're not doing it with all of your heart, which I do believe is a positive thing and a requirement that even newcomers and unexperienced players will accept, at least for optional content that is put onto the sideline of the main scenario quest, and you don't have to participate in that when you're not eager to go in there with all of your heart and passion. Okay guys, I know that this actually may be my own opinion that nobody may share, but there's one more aspect and sort of content that I think is lacking the spicy taste I was talking about, where most of the community would agree with me, namely 4-man content, especially dungeons. While I don't wish for a Mythic Plus or Diablo's Nephilim portal system, I would love to at least have an option to spicing up content for 4 players a bit more. Especially for my prime reason that I always favored playing 2 or 3 player PvP content over everything else in the past. Because hooking up some people for doing this is easily done by just asking one single other person about their schedule and if they're up to the task, instead of arranging a whole meeting with 8 players that can become much more difficult. And I guess the main issue with that topic is the lack of rewards in combination with a good complexity factor, which could actually be solved easily. Right now, apart from glamour, gear that you can get in 4-man dungeons is pointless, and even the glamour aspect is not that great because of the fact that you can easily just farm those with your trust party or wait for the next expansion to push your character's power level, that you can run these unsynced. You remember the argument about constant fear of not getting it done, right? Yes, this applies to dungeons as well, and being the second ingredient that is missing. And one simple solution, while we talked about many others on stream already, would be to grant access to dyeable versions of that gear, or maybe even push them onto the item level of normal 8-man raiding gear, or even a little step above that, simply by running it in higher difficulty modes. Or actually granting gear at all only in the spiced up version of that dungeon. No, I'm not talking about affixes or new boss mechanics, just simply grant enemies more life and let them deal more damage, where wall-to-wall pulls become impossible to achieve, and you cannot just spam your AoEs mindlessly. Or you have to use your stuns or other things your kit offers and being in a real struggle to keep the tank alive as a healer. That would definitely be a good improvement, especially as these dungeons are so well designed on their aesthetical level and such, that it would be a total waste to demand people to participate in just a daily duty no-brainer. But of course, all of this is still my own opinion. The more I would love to hear your thoughts about the situation, or if you think that normal mode content is perfectly fine the way it is, or what ideas you were able to bring to the table that would re-innovate the whole system in a positive way. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section and see you around for a follow-up to this video in the next couple of weeks. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy and keep loving Final Fantasy.